low resolution, though. I have to say, no offense to YouTube, but you don't seem to want to upload my videos anymore. But still, beautiful, eh? Oh. And so I made it through the forest and snow, and I like the idea because you can see some people's trails, and you can really see that I broke a new trail coming out here. I literally just broke off from the main trail, and followed my nose and deer paths, and found basically the fastest way out to the river that I could, not fully knowing where I was, but knowing where the river was. And it looks like a frog out there, right? That's a couple times I've seen that. The spirit of the frog, spirit of purification, and being in good stead with nature. There's an eagle over there. Yeah. So there's something very important that happens on, say, December 21st, we've learned this year, involving a lot of the momentum of the spheres moving into, like I would say, a man's and woman's energy would come to bear upon bringing to birth a new sun and a new chance of birth in the spring. So that the time between December 21st and March 21st could be seen almost like the portion of human life that, at least in an earthly sense, is lived after death and before rebirth in the heavens. So kind of like the Great Blue Road, right? The Great Blue Road, the kind of the road of night between December 21st to March 21st is like the Great Night, right? February is like the 12th night in a sense, but to me, it's 3 months of the Great Night, of the Great Blue Road. And during this time, like, I have had wonderful sort of dreams, more nightmares than usual, but also dreams. And I've received the medicine of moose medicine, and today mixed with coyote medicine as well, which is the medicine can just say, don't worry, my life and your life add up to strength. Strength works in mysterious ways. So a very compassionate way of saying I don't understand everything, but he is very strong, and he wishes me strength. He never disrespected my sense of my hunger to know things. I love that about Kim. And I was thinking about another friend named Raven, true friends that I've had, and Raven was the only person I ever knew who came into my home who had anything nice to say about my place in life as a man, and just, you know, the weird goobers around me. He just ignored that and said, Landon, you always seem to have a nice sense of like how you always seem to be surviving well. What a beautiful measured statement for one man or one human being to say to another. And no one else but a red person could do that. And I wish him well. I wish him, he's a great, strong, wonderful man. And a philosopher in his own right. And a great lover of nature and the modes of communication that preserve the best of human beings in a world that doesn't always seem very geared to nourishing what is the strongest in us. But it's nice to find ways, whatever the world is, to say, like, hey, you can find a strong way for you. You don't have to change the world necessarily to do it. And that's always nice. The middle road, so to speak. I gotta take a shit. Sorry. This bird has been hanging out with me since I started the video, and the last couple of days I've really enjoyed the company of birds. And a seagull came out to see me today while I was holding a seagull feather, and I left it under the pool the seagull had sat on. And wonderful little communications. I decided to take that feather out today and cleaned up my home a little bit and asked for strength and power and wisdom for my family. And I also noticed that nature has in fact made my mom stronger and protects her and me. And so things that seem evil aren't as evil as they could be. Because I certainly, as I'm sure anyone listening to this, certain things in life that you may have reason to think, oh God, that's not going to turn out well. If someone talks about you or talks that way about people, one of the reasons we don't like that, because it could bring negative events. It could presage, prefigure, or telegraph disintegrating energies, which can become cancer, disease, accident. Just had a, oops, just had a good shit. Oh, beautiful sounds and senses. Whew, clouds are beautiful. It's come up in 3 or 4 degrees at least. I like watching some of these. Even if YouTube doesn't like them, I'm like, I'll watch it. Whew. We're just going to hang out for a bit. This is an unscheduled stop at this spot. And it's good to get out here. It's beautiful. Beautiful driftwood. Sometimes it looks like animals. There's a lot to take. My family as well. I've worked hard for that in my strange way. It's too bad I have to call it strange because I'm very thankful, basically the way I do work, for nature's grace. It probably sounds a little conceited. I'm sorry about that. It's probably the nature of the English residual poison and bitterness in my blood, but I am thankful to nature. I don't always that I should not include a little bit more of my own labors, but also I don't think honestly with myself every day that anything I hope to achieve in this world happens without nature's help. I've relied on nature when I'm scared, and I put myself in risky positions energetically to clear various things from my life at a level that a lot of people don't operate. And there are boundaries in what I can do, and it's difficult, but sometimes it's like pulling the thorns out of your heart. But thanks to nature and thanks to nature's positive messages, and there is an intelligence around you that is good for us and knows us and hears us and speaks our language in a way that would help to imagine going, in your mind, going away from the world, letting it be, paying your dues, fulfilling your responsibilities, and just like you go on vacation, go away to a world that kind of really, no offense to anyone else, really speaks your emotional, physical language and intelligence in a way that just lets you scoop up free and added rest and restoration and power, or just coming back to acknowledge the altar and the temples of your power. And in these wild woods, the soundness and long life of your mothers and fathers. Hail Satan. Okay. Sun coming out. Beautiful electric green and yellow through the bare white limbs of what I'll call the trees. I have respect for people who know what trees are called, and the trees themselves. Natural temples of the sun. You see the way the sun comes through the limbs of trees. So did your own limbs come into the world. So did you skip through measures of celestial and cerulean blue and purple, pink and polka dot days. When I love my mother and father, when I try to restore myself from everything that a mother and father can show you, whether you like it or not, I think of them when they were born and when they were children. And they're just as vulnerable as I am. It's like going back to kindergarten for loving my mother and father. At first it comes easy. And you get to be 50 years old and you're like, you want that feeling again. In fact, it wasn't words, it wasn't you loved your mother. Is that you had no reason, if somebody said to you, is there enough love in your life? You'd be like, what? What's that I could not have enough of it? It's just whatever it was, whether it was loving or safe or whatever word you want to use. It was something that you would not be loath to return to, or to see returned such a safety that would return the best of those years and what they might have portended in the most positive sense to everything that you are and deserve because of your place in the world politically and economically and physically and sexually. Because of anything you are, because you can feel such a strong sense of value, the jealous, wonderful, pure attachment to your mommy and daddy. And that is the jealous God, right there. That is the natural, pure jealousy. How does God be jealous? Well, we as children are jealous of anything that adds up to what we think in our own bodies and voices, always something to learn, is safe for us as a child. When a home loses its safety, in some respects you lose your home. And then you have to find it again. It's easier to find your home in life when you never lose it, or you never have it robbed from you. Then you start to become quite jealous of your own survival, irrespective of your mother and father, because something's been broken. And when a home is broken, it goes to work. And when a home goes to work, when relationships become jobs, essentially, that you should be lucky to have some place to sacrifice your time by any order of economic magic to stave off the other ways that you've been sacrificed in your own home to various roles. But even if we convene the New Age Council of Gurus and find 20 different colored personalities that fit you and the kind of person you really are and how you fit into the kaleidoscope of human history, it wouldn't matter. Because ultimately, all of those roles have been developed and incorporated over time because in some sense you were trapped as an animal. And you were unsafe. Not because you said, yeah, I'm unsafe, but your dogs don't say they're unsafe. The penguins don't say they're unsafe. The bear doesn't speak the English language, but they can be unsafe. When you trap them and put them in zoos, do they live as long? Do they reproduce as well? Do they get diseases? Well, the same thing happens to you and your family when they're trapped and they reproduce. Diseases and diseased behavior to go along with it. The truth is, every way of life in society brings disease with it. It brings perverse wear and tear to the stuff of living. So that as people get older often, they don't want to live that much longer. Not just because they're old, but they've just so long lost. Now as they get more and more honest with themselves, the joy of living. They may have 20 grandchildren. They may have left a legacy of tool and die sales that North America will never advance upon, but they've just lost all joy. And when we join religions, the religions themselves have imagined for us under what conditions we could lose all our joy. Because we can lose it, or we have lost it, or we are losing it, or we sense that we're in danger of losing it. or we see other people have lost it. I don't know how to find it. Joy, are you over here? Joy, hey Joy, come over here. I've got some LSD. Woo, let's go. I was always couldn't understand. There's reasons for this. That out of respect for everybody, we're all different. But there's reasons I couldn't understand why I never associate drugs of any kind with being happy or having a good time. Anyone I was around, which wasn't many people, but you'd hear about mushrooms like, oh yeah, I had a great mushroom trip, or oh yeah. When I did mushrooms, I never said, oh yeah, I had a great time. I had a great time on mushrooms. It's fucking hair on the back of your neck freaky when I'm going into a level of power in the earth. If that doesn't fucking make your testicle in your body, you're not doing it right. Fear is a big part of power. I fear what I can feel and the way nature signals to me when I take a few grams of psilocybin. Like that, you are having an effect. And you better hope that I have, 50 fucking miles to roam around in and no one's around, because I don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be bothered. It means a big deal. Because when you're in that state, and even when I smoke marijuana and walk around, some people don't agree with me. And I couldn't totally explain it to you, but it happens sometimes. And you're very sensitive out here. You're very aware. You're very grounded. And you're very alert. And I'm talking a lot, so my brain is very active. And sometimes human behavior of different ages and genders seems extremely infantile. Extremely infantile. And you see that there's different types of rain and snow, and different types of colors and genders. There's different types of projection, and how we as humans project things onto situations and other people. Like, I'm on the side of this river. What if someone came along and said, hey, you're on my river. This is my favorite spot. You're one of those miserable people who get in the way of my happy, good time. What if someone did that? That's a projection, right? It's not real. It started off as something real. I like this spot. I prefer if he wasn't there. I hope he never comes back again and dies. I need this one thing. I'm so sad. This is my special spot. In which case I would say, no problem. You wouldn't have to say anything. I probably wouldn't come back here for 2 months and be like, I think that belongs to that person. I would be unmistakable. Thankfully, this is a place that person would have picked, that it wouldn't matter how many times they came out here. We probably would never see each other again. And so humans project bad things onto other people. And this is important. I was around a woman, let's say, around whom, in various contexts, other women were being inappropriate to me. And this woman was very inappropriate at different levels. And she got so incensed with the steady and honest and really quite giving way I went about trying to make myself a little safer after having violence done to me. And in fact, even retreated and did everything the person said, basically make them comfortable. Because a lot of times when people do violence of any kind, right, using this word carefully, people, lo and behold, don't want to talk about it. It's part of the same system. It's like, go away, go away, go away, go away. Unfortunately, there are people who advance themselves in different kinds of trusts or confidence rackets or groups, and they can't really back it up with ethics. And ethics takes courage. Ethics takes a way of dealing with things, so that if there's a conflict in your school, you don't say, hey, you hurt this person. You say, hey, this person understands that they've offended you in some way, and that maybe you need something that hasn't been properly for your dignity and for you to feel good and strong. And I see it as necessary that we find out what that is. And I think that would be a very positive thing. If that would be positive for you, do you want to do that? And that's how you deal with conflict. Because underneath it all, somebody just wants something. It's often quite infantile, and they don't I think somebody's offended them, or someone's not giving them enough attention, or someone's going to take something from them that they thought was theirs, or even they've insulted them, or yeah, they've been dominant. Behavior is interpreted that way. And think of all the different ways that very timid, sensitive, and sometimes unbalanced people can interpret social dynamics, especially when you're doing stuff around healing, because people are, or a sacred area of any kind that people enjoy restorative and playful interaction, is that people, depending on where they come from, are very jealous of that being what they want it to be and what they expect it to be, or what they're encouraged to project onto it that it's going to feel like for them, and how pretty soon, like, hey, all these things are going to be fulfilled, and all of a sudden something happens that's the last thing that they expected to happen because it doesn't fit into their happy place. And pretty soon there's going to be two people that feel that way, right? At least two. And then maybe that person's going to do the right thing and talk to the leader, which is what the other person should have done. And then the leader's going to get mad at that person instead of talking to the initiating person who thought that this other third person, provoked them in some way. And maybe we can work it out. And maybe human beings can have their needs and be respected, and this can be done in a positive way. But you notice that never happens. ever happens. Nobody is ever alpha enough in any of these groups, because the people can play alpha roles, but they're not real alphas. And they don't know how to say to someone, which is you got to do if you're an alpha leading a group, be able to say to people, men or women of any size or gender or rank, and say, hey, in our group, you don't do that. If you want to do that, you're going to have to leave. Here, you have to take a more peaceful route, and this is what it would be. You can still get your needs met, but you don't do it this way. This other way, you're not going to get what you want. And then you're just going to be miserable, right? And maybe you didn't even start this, but it's like, unfortunately, there's only a few ways to go about it, and it's not by doing that. And if you can't have that conversation with someone in your group, you don't deserve to be the leader. Why do people trust you? You know there's going to be conflict. Someone has to tell people how not to behave. Don't do that here, because people find places that they like that are healing, and then all of a sudden, you don't have to be 6 years old. Behavior just comes out. It's like teasing out the snakes inside people's minds. And maybe the subconscious is talking, or people may have theories of group dynamics and so forth. But what I know, and what little I know, but which is enough for me for now, is people can draw things out of other people, not nice things. I've had people be violent to me, men and women, because they didn't think I made enough eye contact or said hello to them the way that they want. It wasn't that I didn't acknowledge them in passing in some place like this, is that I didn't acknowledge them the way they wanted. And they vocalized and projected aggression onto me and at me, as though there was something wrong with me. And I, in particular, quite often was probably in a contemplative mood and just used to putting out respectful energy to anyone else, like, namaste, you know what I mean? If you're outside and you're enjoying your time and it's sacred, and someone walks by 50 feet away and is so absorbed in their own world that they barely notice you, that's usually a good thing. It's a good thing. You understand? That's like when dogs pass by and they're just like sniffing each other's asses and they just go on. You're like, it's like they don't even notice you. That's a good thing. But some people, it's like there's an electrical current in the air, and it's like, no, I want something from you. And they go as far as to actually project that out into the public sphere. And when you experience it, you're like, where do these fucking people come from? Has no one ever told them not to do that? We all get frustrated, we all have moods, but you don't project anger onto other people. As a man, if I did that, I'd be in jail by now. But you know how many women, and I don't want to get on my soapbox, you know, women have basically initiated violent sexual contact with me in my life, just in public or in other very sensitive areas. Enough I could fill a book with it. I know it happens to people. I know it's awful for everyone. You don't want to make it worse than it is. But here's the thing. It is, to me anyway, when somebody, for any of the reasons, no matter how angry you feel one day, goes out of their way to project anger onto another person, they can do to men as much as men can do to women. And every gender has their special forces, that just can do this type of thing. And you're like, wow, you make your gender look worse. Because every gender has its advantages. I've had young females grab my ass and my balls while waiting in line to get a coffee in front of witnesses. You think anyone did anything? Right? Every gender has its advantages. They got a free feel. I didn't even get a free coffee. These are people, boys, who learn to transfer not even sexual feelings, but a sense of sexual identity and excitement and lowered inhibitions onto and around strangers. And you might say in the hopes of, landing a big fish and having sex. The trouble with that, even when they have sex, and especially so, is it's not really about sex anymore. It's about sex. And that type of person will be sexually promiscuous. It's not my job to say, hey, don't do that. You think that would have helped? I waited about 3 years and then I masturbated with a fantasy of taking them home and fucking them. And it finally kind of took off the anger. I had to sort of rape them in my mind, kind of reciprocate, in my fantasies. Like, I wasn't raping them, but it's like, okay, you like me? All right, then play with my dick. Go ahead. Knock your tits off. Once or twice, whack off. Oh, okay. At least I got something out of it. I'm not no 12-year-old girls, but if you're old enough to touch a strange man's ball, I guess you've really lost all shame. You're now like my personal porn star. Now, I waited 3 years, aroused by being poisoned, essentially, by estrogen in public. Because that's what it is. It's estrogen, right? So if you want to follow its course, these girls have been amped up in terms of aggression, territorial behavior probably. Risk take for them is fun. It's a good memory, I guess. But it will lead to other things. And they've taken what they wanted. They've taken from me, right? My pulse is elevated. I don't feel safe. I feel trapped. The woman selling me the coffee doesn't do anything, but she later shows a consciousness of guilt. And you might say, well, what would you have done if you could do anything? I probably would have turned around and repeatedly smashed their skulls. Repeatedly smashed their skulls together until they were so bloody that they never want to go near a man's ass again. Which is exactly what you would say maybe to young boys who came up to a 40 or 50-year-old woman by herself who's already been raped several times in her life and squeeze her ass and stand behind her as though you're her fucking personal sexual entourage. What do you think about that, ladies? Do you think those boys should get away without a little bit of blood? Just to teach them what not to do. I'm not saying you should do that, but that's the anger. And that's the poisoning. What they're doing is not pleasant. It's not joyful. It's full of murder and violence. Right? That's why the social genetic profile of one store I studied had an employee who would sell and had to heat up for time frozen sausage rolls for a man who consumed probably 500, 300 calories a day and lived in his car. And this man outside the store beat this man to death with a piece of lumber. had to be satisfied with destroying part of the vehicle that he lived in that had been donated to him by a family member. And to have that person and study the store and to have a 19-year-old face mask during COVID stalking me and sexually harassing me in the store. I never came back. And